Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Bob Mendelsohn, and this is the Bob's Your Uncle podcast. Today we finish our interview with Kelvin Crombie, an author and a fascinating man from West Australia, whose latest book on the Holocaust reveals more about the phases of Hitler's plans, more to this than you ever imagined. Thanks for joining me for this Bob's Your Uncle podcast Season 3, Episode 14. Of note, the opinions are strictly my own and those of my guests. I hope you enjoy Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto in E minor. It's one of my favorites. You can now find us and comment to us wherever you get your podcasts. Tell us what matters to you, what triggers your joy, what bothers you in the world. Let us know. We'll see where the Spirit leads us. Whether you're at home, online, on the road with me in your headset at the gym, or out for your evening constitutional, wherever you get your podcasts, that's where we will be. Thanks for being with us these 18 minutes.
But I do know that I love you, and I know that if you love me too, what a wonderful world this would be.
On this date in history, 14th of March in 1489, the last Queen of Cyprus, Catherine Cornaro, is forced to abdicate by Venice. In 1794, Eli Whitney patented the cotton gin machine, which revolutionized the cotton industry in the southern United States. Finally, in 1880, the Salvation Army of England started working in the United States at Harry Hill's Variety Theater in New York City. And that's the historical marker of the week. Let's pick up the episode today from the past, where we were listening to Kelvin Crombie, with whom I shared some days in Melbourne last week. We'll jump right in. You don't want to miss a moment of the rest of this interview. It's more than just the coincidence of random facts. It really is God who led you in that way. Now, you've just written a new book on the 7 phases of the Holocaust. I've never heard that term before. This is obviously one you've come up with. By phase, you mean parts of a timeline involved in the removal of the Jewish people. What prompted your writing in this abbreviated style?
Well, overall, the whole recent involvement in studying and researching and writing about the Holocaust came from a request from Reverend David Pileggi from Christchurch in Jerusalem for me to begin to research what happened to the Jewish followers of Jesus during the Holocaust. So to do that, you actually have to read about the bigger picture. And sometimes to actually find the little tiny details of what happened to the Jewish followers of Jesus, you actually have to read through lots of material just to find the needle in the haystack. Well, I was reading a lot of material, a huge amount of material, in books, in archives. I went to archives in 3 continents, for instance, to locate that. I went to numerous concentration camps and death camps and killing fields and forests where Jewish people had been murdered in Europe. I went to lots of places, and I found I was getting swamped by the information. And it was so much information that I couldn't see what it was all about. And so one particular occasion, I was reading a book about a Jewish lady who came from the western part of Germany. She was a non-Aryan Christian, that is to say she was involved in the Lutheran Church, but she was Jewish according to the Nazi worldview, bloodline, so she's Jewish. Well, her and about 1,000 other Jewish people from Western Germany were sent down to the southern part of France.
Wait, not going to Auschwitz?
No.
They didn't go to a death camp?
Not then. There was no such thing as death camps in 1940. That only came towards the end of 41 and began to operate basically at the beginning of 42. The concentration camps, but there were no death camps. So this lady and all these other Jewish people were sent to a place called Gurs in the southern part of France in the Pyrenees. And I couldn't comprehend that. I said, it doesn't make sense. If anything about the Holocaust makes sense. This didn't make any sense at all.
Now, for you to say it didn't make sense, and you've been a student of the Holocaust for, at that point, 35 years, wait a minute.
Yeah.
That does. To me, I think you'd probably seen it all.
Well, I thought, I wouldn't say I was a student for 35 years, but I'd been, interested and had read stuff. But I'd never heard of this. If I had, it wasn't significant at the time that I'd read it, right?
Okay.
Now I said, right, I've got to follow this through. And that's when I became aware of a plan that the Nazis had, a serious plan, to transport 4 million Jewish people to the island of Madagascar. And so this was just the first lot, going down to the southern part of France, easier then to put them onto a ship and send them down to Madagascar. The French had been defeated, but the British hadn't. Okay, so plan B, or the second part of the plan, was they had to defeat Britain, or Britain had to surrender, because while Britain ruled the waves, while the Navy was there, you could not send any ships with Jewish people down to Madagascar.
So they had to go through the Suez Canal or past Gibraltar.
One of the two.
And both were owned and operated by
the British.
Okay,
so that was a phase. So I did a lot of research on that and actually located the original plan that Eichmann had drawn up. Eichmann and another guy called Thomas Dannecker, the Nazis, but also the Foreign Office did a plan as well. So I located that plan at Wannsee House in Germany and photographed it. Got some other material. So then I realized, well, here was a phase. Here was a plan, a legitimate plan by the Nazis to actually transport 4 million Jewish people to the island of Madagascar, but it didn't work. Okay, that's when I realized, that's a phase. Well, what happened before? What happened after? And that then helped me to come up with my own model, that there were 7 phases, okay? And each of those phases, in a sense, there was a bit of a transition, but each of those phases was led into the next phase until finally you get the final phase or the final solution.
Which is what everybody knows popularly, the final solution.
That's right, but it didn't start there. It didn't start like that. And that was the revelation for me.
And for you, because you were deluged with information. There was so much, and you wanted, how should we call it, Holocaust simplified?
Yeah.
Or Holocaust, I don't want to demean myself, but Holocaust for dummies. You thought if you abbreviated it into these 7 phases and simplified it, that it'd be almost bite-sized for the reader.
Well, it was bite-sized for me, and then I thought, well, if it's bite-sized for me, then it could help others. But it gave me the ability thereafter, with all the stuff I was reading, dates, decisions, then I could actually take that information and put them into phase 3, phase 4, phase 6, and then it made sense why those decisions were being made and consequences. It made sense if I understood which phase they would go into. So I had a timeline, and even though there's overlap, nevertheless, it did help me tremendously.
The old model of the rainbow is that there were 7 colors. Mind you, we know that there are thousands of colors, but it was Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, and each one of your phases could be a red, orange, yellow. And so there's a morphing between red and orange. And in the same way as you described it earlier at our conference where we're sitting here in Melbourne, that there were some overlaps between phase 1, phase 2, but there are moments that are part of only one or of another.
Oh, for sure.
That really helps me. I love history, I love numbers, and I love seeing sequence, because then things begin to make sense.
Yeah.
People ask us all the time, where was God in the Holocaust? How could he let 6 million Jews and however many millions of other people, 40 million Russians, how could so many people die in a war? Where's God in that? Do you ever have an answer for that?
No, I don't have a substantive answer, but all I can say from the little that I have researched and the little that I know about the subject is that in the context of 6 million Jewish people, there were potentially tens of thousands of Jewish followers of Jesus. people who had a heart commitment. There might have been many others who actually might have been baptized in parts of churches that we don't really know where they were at in their individual relationship with the Lord. But the fact of the matter is that there are many God-fearing Jewish followers of Jesus and other God-fearing Jewish people who went into the Holocaust and never surrendered their understanding and their relationship with God.
They died in faith.
They died in faith. And that we do know, okay, because there is enough testimonies for us to realize that, yes, these people, as they went to Auschwitz or they went to the pits in Belarus or Ukraine or Lithuania somewhere and were shot, they didn't surrender their faith. Now, some might very well have done so, but there's enough testimonies to show us that many did not.
I liked your answer that we don't know. There are people who know everything about theology, and God was involved in this, and God was, and an honest, humble person has to say, I don't know why that happened.
Listen, I don't. I honestly don't.
There are benefits. There are things that came out of it. There are assets. There's plenty of liabilities and pain and suffering. It's so hard, but it's good to keep processing, I think. Because the more we know God, the more we understand what he's doing. The Psalm says he made known his deeds to the children of Israel, his ways to Moses. So there's a depth of understanding him that's personal, that Moses had, that my people didn't have necessarily.
Well, let me put it this way. What color is your jacket?
Today it's gray.
What color is your shirt, basically?
Gray and white.
So I've come to the realization that life isn't all black and white. Often life is gray.
There's a lot of gray.
On a subject matter as deep and as serious and as heavy as the Holocaust, there's a lot of gray areas for me.
Yeah. And I think that's humble and beautiful, and we can keep processing it with others who are also struggling. How do people reach you? Website, email, what do you want to give out?
Well, my email address is kelvin@heritageresources.com.au.
How do they spell Kelvin?
Kelvin, and then Heritage Resources is one word, heritageresources.com.au.
Beautiful.
And if people are interested in the stuff, they can contact you, for instance.
Sure, people write me all the time about my guests, mostly positive.
Yeah, okay, well, let's hope that continues the
Well, I'd like that too. By the way, how will the Eagles and the Dockers fare against the Sydney Swans this year?
What colour's your jacket again?
Red and white.
I don't know. I really don't know. Listen, I told a story on Saturday, I think it was, or somewhere. It might have been at church in Geelong. I was preaching in Geelong on Sunday.
We had trouble with them last year.
And I said to the people in Geelong, I said, listen, recently I was watching the Australian women's cricket team, and I was in a high that they won the World Cup.
Yeah.
But at the same period of time, the Australian men's cricket team just got walloped by the Indians, so I was in a low. So with football, with the Eagles and the Dockers, one week you're on a high, the next week you're in a low.
But you got two chances, and some places only have, like Brisbane only has one. I guess they got Gold Coast now.
Yeah, they got Gold Coast as well.
Never
You got
mind.
two. You got two.
We've
teams
got two.
as well.
GWS has been in form, and Sydney's looking good. We'll see.
We'll see.
Is there anything else you might want to say to the worldwide Bob's Your Uncle podcast audience?
Listen, just keep praying. Praying is it's an important part of the work that I do. If you can keep praying that I would find the information, because this is an ongoing subject we're working on. I'm trying to do the same for all the countries of Europe during the Holocaust, to find information about the Jewish followers of Jesus in those different countries and the context of the Holocaust there. Pray that I can continue to find the materials and then be able to put it together. I've gone through quite a few, it's not burnouts, there's another word I used the other day. I've had a couple of real downers from doing this, because it's a very emotional subject.
It's depressing to look at the suffering of the world.
And so I need to find a balance and to remain in that balance. Because I don't want to be distant, okay, but you've got to have a certain distance from the subject matter. But I want to be close enough to empathize. Because if you want to speak on the subject matter, you can't do it from an academic perspective, because these are people. We're talking about real live people, Bob. We're not talking about statistics. And when I speak on the subject matter, I want the people at the other end to see that I'm talking about real live people who had lives, and those lives were cut short. But I'll tell you one thing. I have a sense it's just a sense, that of those Jewish followers of Jesus who died in the Holocaust, if they could say something, they'd say, let life come forth from the darkness we had to go through. Let there be life from death. And so if anybody can, through this whole research that we're doing and the writing we're doing, if anybody can actually receive life from it, then that is worthwhile.
So be it. Thanks so much, Kelvin. What a joy. Bless you, brother.
Thank you. Thank you, Uncle Bob. I had an Uncle Bob too, and he was a great uncle.
Every week we read from the #1 bestseller of all time. And again today is no exception. From Psalm 103, verse 7. God made known his ways to Moses, his deeds to the children of Israel. What do you think about all this? Write me on bobmendo@aol.com or comment or even video to me on Instagram or Twitter at Bob's Your Uncle PC. I'd love to know what you think about all this. Don't forget to follow this podcast on your app. Thanks. Next week we'll be sharing with Mark Rogers, another Gentile who loves Jewish people. I hear a theme here. And how he serves our people with music and sincere love. Next week, we'll launch on the 21st of March. That's Tuesday. It is an equinox, spring, vernal, whatever you call it, autumnal, wherever you get your podcasts. See you then. Until then, from me, Bob Mendelsohn, when things seem bleak or uncertain, look up to God. He's in his heaven. And Bob's your uncle. Shalom from Sydney.